Legal experts now. CNN's chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin is with us, as are Gloria Brown-Marshall, a constitutional law professor at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and Shanlon Wu, a CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor. Jeffrey, let me go to you first. The lawyers picked by the Democrats recommend impeaching Mr. Trump. The lawyer picked by the Republicans doesn't. Does that discredit this process?
Not at all. I mean, you know, the Constitution was written in the 18th century, and the terms are necessarily general. I mean, the provision for impeachment says presidents can be impeached or removed from office for bribery, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. The meaning of those terms wasn't apparent in the 18th century, and it's a subject of debate even today. And I thought this was a very serious, honorable, good faith discussion by these law professors about what these terms mean and whether President Trump's behavior qualifies as an impeachable offense. I thought if people listened, they got a good argument from both sides. So I don't think this discredited the Constitution or this process. I thought it showed that these things are subject to disagreement, and you pick your side.
Okay, but I mean, it is kind of funny that the three lawyers picked by the Democrats say what the Democrats really want to hear, and the one picked by the Republicans say what the Republicans want to hear. So to members of the U.S. public or to our viewers, it does not tell us that they're reading the Constitution through partisan lens.
Well, they do, but there is no other way to read the Constitution except through a partisan lens. I mean, the Constitution does not define itself. The Constitution is full of phrases like due process of law, freedom of speech. Those terms you need to have an ideological viewpoint to define them. And that's always going to be the case. That's why our Supreme Court, which has 9 members, often divides 5-4, because these cases are hard and the justices have different viewpoints in that they bring to these cases. And that's true here as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. Sean, the Republican-appointed expert says that there just isn't enough evidence against the president. His problem is evidence. Do you feel that there are holes in the case the Democrats have built against the president?
There aren't any holes in the case they've built against him. Professor Turley really was doing more of the same of what the Republicans have been doing, which is arguing questions of process. You know, one of his statements was that it will be a mistake. You can't impeach a president this way, leaving half the American people behind. You need the public to catch up. I mean, that's a perfectly valid opinion he has, but has no basis in the Constitution. As last time I checked, they didn't have public opinion polls around the time of the framers. So that's just his opinion on this. And honestly, with all due respect to the law professors, there's only a limited amount that can be enlightened about the framers' intent. A couple of things were important. They didn't want maladministration. They wanted to focus on misconduct, putting in high crimes. But it did come down to a little bit of partisanship today, but I think it was very important for the American people to hear about the basics in the Constitution, because it is a legal proceeding. It's not just a bunch of politicians yelling at each other.
Gloria, you teach constitutional law. Would the framers, the founding fathers, be okay with what happened today?
I think this is what they had in mind, a debate among people who have a vested interest in the nation's future. And a fear, I think, was among the founders that there would be outside foreign national influence. And that's why they specifically speak of this as being a part of the high crime or misdemeanor. The idea of treason, the idea of a foreign national, the emoluments clause speaks to benefits from a foreign national. All of these things are problems, obstacles, and processes that the founding fathers wanted us to debate and then justifiably, if necessary, remove from office those people who delve in this type of behavior. And now you have to say whether or not it's proven or the conspiracy to do it. There's nothing that says conspiracy is also not a high crime or misdemeanor.
I think that's such an important point that one of the things we learned today is that the framers of the Constitution were so concerned, especially in the early, in the 18th century, when the United States was big geographically but small in power, that they were worried about foreign domination, foreign influence over our elections and over our processes. And that's why several professors said President Trump's behavior was so wrong and so much deserving of impeachment because he brought he used the foreign policy of the United States not to advance American interests, but only to advance his personal political interest. And that, that I think is a powerful argument for those who are open to reason.
Jeffrey, if you look at the whole process, the point of Wednesday for the Democrats is to set them up to decide what kind of articles of impeachment they can draft, if they can draft them. So where do you think they're heading with this?
Well, I think it looks likely at this point that there will be three main articles of impeachment. One is abuse of power, and that is the president using his power, withholding evidence, withholding White House meetings, not withholding evidence, withholding aid to Ukraine in return for political dirt on his opponents. That's one article. The next article, I think, will be obstruction of justice. The president, this was dealt with mostly in Robert Mueller's report that came out earlier about the president trying to get Mueller fired. And the third article came up a lot today, which is obstruction of Congress, refusing to provide evidence, refusing to provide witnesses, documents, emails to allow Congress to do its job. Those three articles look like they will be the most likely.
Sean, what's the best argument that Republicans have made, either today or before?
I'm not sure they've made their best argument yet. They've hinted at what I think their best argument is, which is, if I were advising them, which I'm not, I would lean into the core power of the president to conduct foreign policy. And if they really emphasize that, they touched upon that a little bit, but they don't really know what to do with it. If they would argue that he has very broad discretion given to him to conduct foreign policy, then they can just get into a tit for tat over, well, are you just disagreeing with what he did here on foreign policy? Tough argument to make, because it seems so obvious he wasn't interested in the foreign policy, but I actually think that's their strongest argument.
Gloria, just before we go, what do you tell your students about this? Because this, books are going to be written and classes are going to be taught about this moment.
I tell them that history is taking place in front of their eyes. And I remember back in the day watching the Nixon hearings. I was concerned in my life during the day that I did not see as many televisions tuned to this hearing, that I think people are not taking the time and the attention that's necessary, as Jeffrey pointed out, to think this through and understand that this is a very deep and important part of our history, of our nation. The Constitution is what binds us in a nation of so many differences, and people really need to pay attention. I would tell them to do just that. Pay attention. This is history.
Yeah, yesterday I was actually speaking to a guest who made your point. The Democrats aren't really engaging with the Republicans in a back and forth. They're speaking to history. They've got to dot their I's and cross their T's, because this is going to be studied. And if they mess this up, their mistakes now, if they make any, will go down in history as well.
Don't kid yourself. They're also talking to voters. These are all politicians, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the framers set it up so that politicians would be making these judgments. But all of these politicians on both sides are very much thinking of what their constituents, what their voters are thinking about these issues, because they never want to get too far out of line with the people who can take them out of their jobs.
Although I also think the Republicans are very much thinking about what the president thinks of them.
But the vote has never been unanimous. In any of these impeachments, there have been so few, but it's not been unanimous. So this idea that the American people and everyone has to be on board is untrue.
Yes, that's for sure.
Look, at every step of this process, we ask ourselves the same question. Did what we just see move the needle for the American people? Because we know that public opinion is going to sway what happens next, especially if it goes to trial in the Senate. So I suppose this question I'm asking all three of you, and I'll start with you, Gloria. Do you think anything has changed as far as public opinion based on what you heard today?
I think people are pretty much dug in, but I do think that the Republicans or conservatives, however you want to put the supporters of Trump, have found it difficult to answer the question, if this is not an impeachable offense, then what is? And I think that question is something that we all need to discuss. So that could move the needle a little bit, What is it that we have to do in this country in order to impeach a president if this isn't it? How many more
Sean,
nations does he have to cajole, persuade, bribe, extort before they say, of the Republican side, that this has been an impeachable offense?
Shan?
Well, I think that one interesting thing was I saw a poll which indicated one of the big bumps in more people supporting the idea of the impeachment actually came after Nancy Pelosi announced that they were going to open the inquiry. So it's possible that rather than the substance slowly seeping in, people paying close attention to it, it's really the momentum that may move more of the American public. As they come out with the articles of impeachment, it looks serious. Sure, they're getting through osmosis listening to what he actually did wrong, but it's possible that some of the opinion is really just swayed through the momentum of the articles coming down and they're actually trying him.
Jeffrey, should the Democrats have just taken their time over this? As the Republican-appointed lawyer was saying, removing a president is no joke, no mean feat. The bar has to be extremely high. There is no reason to want to rush the process and get a vote by December 25. They should have taken their time, and why not take the time to work it through the courts, bring in John Bolton to testify, bring in Mick Mulvaney to testify and hear what they had to say.
Well, there is no guarantee that they could ever get those people to testify. And, I think Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, who was very much in charge of this process, feels like the Republican Party is so locked in its views of defense of Trump that it would be of no consequence that they got more evidence, that there is no quantum of proof that will be satisfactory to Republicans here. And Speaker Pelosi is very concerned that her Democrats, the Democrats in the House of Representatives, move on to doing other things, go on to deal with health care and the economy and infrastructure and all the issues that they ran on, and they want to be able to face the voters in November of next year with almost a full year of other bills that they have passed. But it's a good question. That's the thinking behind Pelosi's behavior, but I don't know that she's right. But that's certainly how the Democrats are proceeding.
Gloria, tell us about next steps. I mean, the overwhelming likelihood is that the House of Representatives is going to impeach this president. Then it goes to a trial in the Senate. Tell us about that.
Well, the trial will have the Chief Justice, John Roberts, presiding over it. My concern is that we have a Supreme Court that's under mass suspicion because of the way in which these last two justices have ascended to the court. And so there's a great deal of suspicion about our federal government in general. This is bringing more suspicion. And so it's going to be, I think, a great concern as to how the Senate, since it's already dug in as far as the majority Republican conservatives have decided in backing Trump, will then be viewed when they have also a conservative justice who is presiding over the process.
It's kind of difficult, to be honest, to take the whole thing seriously with all the protocol and the process when, in actual fact, everything that the Democrats touch turns out in their favor because they control how it works. And then next step we're going to see is the Republicans are going to control how it works, and it's going to turn out in their favor with everybody believing that the Republicans are going to acquit the president. Shan?
Well, that may be true, but nonetheless, I think it's important to go forward and that the members of Congress have to be courageous and not just be only beholden to their next vote. This sort of process was envisioned by the framers, and it was envisioned by the framers in times which would not be easy calls to make. This is not an easy time to live in, not an easy time to legislate in, and so it's a hard task, but they're the ones who should be doing it.
But also, our international viewers, I think, are savvy about American politics. They know that we are at an extremely polarized moment in American politics. The differences between Democrats and Republicans, not just on this issue, but on all sorts of issues, have never been deeper or more bitter. So it is not surprising that the House of Representatives, which is controlled by Democrats, will proceed with impeachment, and the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, will not come anywhere near the 67 votes, that is 2/3 of the senators required to remove the president from office. It is a symptom of our politics that prevails right now.
But we also
Right,
know that no president has ever been removed by impeachment.
Right.
And that this is to send I think to send a strong message to Donald Trump. Stop, cease and desist in this behavior, because you're not only undermining the White House, you're undermining this country.
All right, Jeffrey Toobin, Gloria Brown Marshall, Shan Wu, thank you very much to all of you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.